Welcome to Kai Dragon Gardening and Cooking. I'm your host, Kai, with the other host,
Anne.
And today we are doing a mother and son kind of discussion with gardening. And we're going to talk about what it's like with different generational gardening. Something that, you know, her mom was a gardener and a farmer, and she did a lot of gardening, and of course, you know, about 4 years ago I took over and doing gardening. So we all have different ways to do gardening and different experiments. So first of all, Mom, Anne. It's kind of weird calling you Anne, but well, anyway, please share a little bit about your gardening experience.
Well, growing up on a farm, actually, I can remember back when I was pretty little. Grandma and Grandpa lived in town, but they had a huge backyard. They actually had 2 lots back then. And Grandma Hammersmith, she married a Hammersmith. She was actually a Quint. Their families did a lot of gardening and farming when they were all little and stuff. So, I mean, it was like you had to grow your own food. You couldn't depend on the stores for everything. She done a lot of baking, a lot of canning, a lot of different types of food preparations for storage. They did a lot with drying out their spices by hanging them up. They hung a lot of stuff upside down. They utilized their basements and we had outside storm cellars. And I can remember, even as a little girl, how it was kind of dangerous to go down those steep stairs carrying jars and stuff, but Grandma did it, Mom did it. It was just something that they did because those cellars were a lot cooler and the food would keep longer. And when they did a lot of canning and stuff, they kept that stuff, and you know, of course they used it up because making a lot of meals and stuff, but they were able to keep that stuff for quite a few years. Grandpa, he didn't hunt a lot, but they did some hunting and stuff, and there was a lot of food preparation there and storing and things like that. And I remember when I got married the first time, we did a lot of even our own meat grinding and freezing and things like that. So, you know, trying to store food so you would have stuff, especially going in through the winter months and stuff, it was crucial back then. And even putting out small gardens, I remember not having the yard space and had to grow a lot of stuff in flower pots. But I was pretty successful with the tomato plants and pepper plants and a few things like that. I think I might have had a few spices, but I didn't do a whole lot with that. It's mostly tomatoes and peppers. I didn't until I got a little bit older, after the divorce and stuff, and single, and Kai was growing up, and it just seemed like money was tighter and it was easier to sow and grow by putting stuff directly in the ground and stuff. And so we had bought the house next door, and so we had a little more ground. And you know, unfortunately, even then it was hard to grow stuff because the next lot over had a lot of black walnut trees, and I don't know if anybody remembers anything about black walnut trees, but as the tree gets bigger and bigger and bigger, the roots actually put out like a poison. There's a lot of plants that will not grow due to the roots of a black walnut tree. And you find yourself over the years, the ground will get very barren. If you're trying to grow grass, it disappears. So you basically end up growing everything in pots and big containers and stuff. We didn't have the nice grow bags and the luxury of the garden beds like they do now. That was in later years when that started coming about, where you could buy the raised beds that you put together yourself, and a lot of them were made out of wood. I remember we did make a lot of raised beds using old railroad ties back then, because that was something that was accessible. Even when I was a little girl and Mom had a big garden, and since we had chickens and they free range and roamed around and stuff, she had to have fences up and sometimes clip the wings of the chickens so they wouldn't be flying into the garden. And her garden was pretty massive. She grew the old-fashioned German blackberries that were the little tiny round blackberries. She made Schwarzbeere pockets, and I can't pronounce some of that stuff right, I'm sure. The blackberry kuga, I just loved that. They were almost like eating a small blueberry, only they were blackberries, and they were just absolutely wonderful. But she done so much baking because she learned from her mom, and I wish I would have watched more growing up and learned more about, because they didn't follow recipes. It was like, you know, you'd have to watch them. They would dump this and dump that, and I remember Kai being a little tiny little tyke, and I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom when he was real little, so I had a bait shop and I sold fish bait to everybody around the county area. And because we were close to 3 rivers and stuff, and so I'd start my day up real early, because we had started out with running 24-hour service with a little buzzer, and people would ring that bell and I'd have to get up, it didn't matter what time of day it was, and run out there to sell a dozen worms or a pack of sinkers, or, you know, just whatever they needed. But I was thrilled to death to get the money. I mean, that's when a pack of sinkers was 25 cents. So if you price this stuff in the stores now, I mean, that was a long time ago.
I think you're looking $3 or $4 now.
I started that stuff back in 1984, and so here's this little 4-year-old child, and he was taught to get up in the morning, and if I was outside, he was told to come out and let Mommy know that he was awake so I could go in between customers and get breakfast made so he'd have something to eat. Well, he kind of learned by watching me. He loved Rice Krispie treats. I will never forget the morning that he came out to the store, and I had a bunch of customers in there, and he was just learning to say some of the different words were kind of difficult, you know, because they're that little, they don't really have all their teeth yet. And I know the word fish sounded like shish, and he'd say, "Have good luck shishing," and everybody just thought it was so cute. Well, that one morning he came out, he must have got up super early and didn't tell me, and he comes out with these mounds of Rice Krispies in this gooey substance on a plate.
It was marshmallows and peanut butter. I do remember that, because I had tried to follow the recipe, because I thought, hey, give it out to everybody, share love. And
so he says, "I made everybody treats for breakfast," and one of the customers was like, "You don't want to hurt his feelings, you're going to have to try some of this." And he took a bite and he just kind of looked at me and he was trying to swallow and turn his head. And of course Kai was like, "It's really good. I made a big pot. I'll go get you some for later." And I said, "Yeah, that's a good idea. Go get some and put it in a plastic Ziploc bag and bring it back out. So that way he can take some with him." I said, "And we'll bag it up and that you could start giving it to the customers that way." And he's like, "Okay." So he goes running back in the house and the poor guy looks at me and goes, "Have you tasted this? This is the most horrible stuff." He says, "There's Rice Krispies and big chunks of this gooey white stuff." I said, "It's probably marshmallow cream." And he goes, "And gobs of peanut butter in here." He said, "And some butter." He goes, "But you know what?" He goes, "I bet that'll make good carp bait." And I go, "I bet it would too." So when he comes back out with the bag and he goes, "What are we going to do with this stuff?" And I said, "I'll think of something." And so I had some plastic wrap from bags and stuff, and I cut it with the scissors and wrapped that little wad of stuff up. He made it into a ball and shoved it in his pocket. Here comes that little boy out there, and he had bagged up 2 or 3 bags, and he goes, "I made you some for your friends too." Later that day, that guy come back with this string of fish, and I go, "What the hell did you use to catch all that?" And he goes, "Rice Krispie treats." I don't know what kind of recipe he followed, but everybody wants my fish. That's one story I don't think I will ever forget. But we learned, you watch your parents cook and you don't think about it. And you don't ask them what's all in there, and you don't follow the recipes, or they say, "Oh, it's all up here in my head."
Or the time I flooded the kitchen because I was that same age, because I was trying to do dishes to surprise you, and I didn't turn the water off, so the whole kitchen was an inch of water.
Yeah, that was a bad memory then. Let me tell you, ivory liquid on the floor, so slippery. I come running in the house, water's going out the front door. I'm like, what is going on? Goes sliding across the kitchen floor. I got on the phone. I said, "Grandma, you need to come over and get your grandson. I'm about to lose my you-know-what." So,
hey, but it was the start of home ec and gardening, guys. 4 years old.
But anyway, we learn by doing, and it's not always those things that you tell people, but a lot of it's what you observe. So I can remember when he was little and stuff. Now, we did plant a lot of flowers, and I would encourage him to help with that, and he liked the flowers a lot. He was highly allergic to ragweed, though,
and pollen. So sniffing the flowers was essentially a death sentence to me when I was a kid. Not so much now, but if I did that, I was sick for 2-3 weeks.
So I can remember one time having to take him to the doctor, and the doctor said, "What's this little one been into?" And I go, "Well, we went to the fair and they had a whole display of flowers and stuff, and he got too close to the ragweed and he got sick." But keep in mind, he was only about 4 years old, 5 years old.
I was active for 4.
He just, he was a very curious little boy.
I think I was active just to learn and explore everything at 4. I remember just, and it's weird that I can still remember vaguely some stuff, but it's like, even back then I was always trying to learn new things, or trying to cook mac and cheese or whatever. It was one of those things that I picked up, and I picked up a lot of habits from my grandparents, because I'd stay all summer out at the farm with them after school year, and that's where I learned a lot of the farming and gardening and all the stuff that I enjoyed. I mean, if we had the space here and we were allowed, I'd have chickens even here. Chickens are great for their bird manure, for fertilizer, and eggs. I mean, if I could do, and just turn them loose in the garden eating the bugs. I mean, but you know, it's always been interesting because I remember learning stuff from her and learning a lot from grandma and even great grandma. So if you want to count 4 generations of gardeners, because grandma's mother-in-law was a big gardener, always had massive cucumbers and stuff, so she grew a lot of cucumbers and watermelon. And so everybody that I knew, my family, did this. It was, so, you know, for me, roll forward, I've always dreamt of a house and having a garden and having all this stuff. And as I got older, you know, life was never always easy to get to this part, but I finally was able to get a house. And what got me going was this house, after 3 years of searching, had a pear tree, which was something that I thought was really cool. And it had a spacious yard. I mean, it had a basement, because I always want basements, especially in, you know, areas that have a chance of tornadoes. You know, not that it happens very often, but you always want to be safe. And found this place, and then it was just a matter of saving money. I remember before COVID, we had just got back from a cruise that Mom won, and I started researching everything on gardening. I was going through Department of Agriculture, I was going to State University agriculture websites and stuff, trying to remember what we did as a kid. And like she said, you sometimes don't remember, or you don't know what they did. You just kind of try to mimic from memory of what they did.
Observations.
And so I was able to do that, but once I started researching, the big thing that I found was raised beds were the way to go. Now, originally I did only the foot-tall beds, and that's where Mom would begin to tail the baby bunnies, because yes, I forgot bunnies could jump, and they jumped up in those beds, and they were eating all my spinach, they were eating everything that I had, and it was a pain. And then I started researching more into hugelculture, which was raised beds that are about 3 to 4 foot tall. And what you do is you put lumber, not true lumber, logs, basically hardwood, softwood, at the bottom of it, and then you put in compost, dirt, fill it up, and you can put all sorts of stuff. So technically, if you had a whole bunch of leaves and all sorts of stuff, you could toss a ton of that in there, and then you just put dirt in there, and then you mix more compost, and the wood at the bottom will break down over time and become more fertile. But the wood at the bottom also stores water, so when it's super hot during the summer, the soil will leach that water from the wood and pull it back up. And that's why I chose to do that, to keep critters out, and also to do that. So we built, you know, me and my dad experimented with several different types of beds. So we built ones out of our own idea on how to do it with corrugated metal, and really like them. They're still holding. There's some things I would have done differently, but at the time it was still costly to do. Like I think I would have put the wood cage on the outside instead of the inside, because the dirt will break it down over time. But I always wanted to do this type of garden. And I remember when Mom first came to the house, she was shocked to see all the stuff that I'd been growing. And this was year 1 of COVID when all this happened, and I got really aggressive with gardening, and that was my sanity. It was something I enjoyed because I played games. As if some of you guys are familiar with the gaming channel, news channel, I play games. I grew up with games all my life, but
Grew up with the Nintendo when it first came out. It was a great babysitter.
yes, it was. And some of those games taught you a lot too. But if you haven't seen The Man Behind the Dragon on the other channel, Volume 2, that explains a lot. But, you know, I've always had this thirst for knowledge, and I wanted to grow my own food. I wanted to can my own food because I got to the idea that I wanted to kind of go back to the roots of how we used to live and how we, you know, survive and how we make everything fresh and we keep it stored. There's a lot of great channels I've seen on YouTube where there's some Ukraine channels on how to preserve food, how they preserve food during the winter and like during their war. And it's fascinating because I've seen people literally bake bread in jars that you would do the same thing with your peppers and your tomatoes. I wouldn't have thought of that, to be honest. Then you have cooked meats. You know, I really didn't realize how much you could do. So even as I have progressed, I've learned new things that even I didn't know. And, you know, it's been very fascinating. And of course, you know, we also have some critters here that like to say hi and be in the spotlight. This one in particular loves the spotlight.
This is Wendy, our wander dog. She wanders all around the garden for hours, protecting me from creatures. She alerted me when the 3 little bad boys were here hanging out in the pear tree and we had the raccoon problem so bad. So she's quite the little helper. And she's out here a lot of times sitting in the chair when I'm making videos and stuff. She does love the attention and does love to be in the videos.
Yes,
so
she does.
Spam some hearts for the dachshunds. They need that loving too. And Charlie's out walking around. Annabella's taking her nap. She my old puppy and she needs a little more sleep. This t-shirt, I don't know if you can actually see, is a drawing that I did. I make t-shirts and sell them on Amazon. It's ANZ Funtime Designs. Anyway, these are my babies, my furry babies. I drew their picture and have them on a shirt. I made several different designs using my little dachshunds. And I even have a dachshund journal out. I'm really big into doing that kind of stuff. And that's another thing that is different from when we were kids growing up. I wish that Mom had kept a journal of some of the things that she did, when she planted them, how she went about doing some of the things. Some of her knowledge, I can only do things by what I remember. And then when you go to look it up, it's like, that's not how she did it.
Everybody had their own style. That's the thing. Everybody always
things change.
I mean, grow bags wasn't a thing. I mean, people growing things in, like especially potatoes and onions in grow bags. You know, a lot of people toss them in the ground. But as in one of the videos that, you know, I talked about and eventually coming out is small potatoes, because I figured it was fresh soil, fresh ground. I made the mistake thinking too much into that and not realizing how hard the soil was, which, you know,
it needed a lot more compost in it, and it needed to be amended real good before we plunged into direct sowing. But it was something we learned. It was an experiment, and it did make the grilled, you know, potato, pea, and ham soup. So it's like, never throw nothing away if it's still edible. I mean, I did learn that. We grew up, we weren't rich, pretty poor. I can remember a lot of times eating bologna several days a week, and Mom would camouflage it, frying it up.
Fried bologna. Bologna tortillas.
Just whatever way, you know, she'd cut them and say that she was making us little flowers. I mean, just whatever to get us to eat the same thing. I mean, sometimes we just had to do it. It's just, you know, it wasn't, things were a lot different back then than they are now. It gets frustrating sometimes in the garden. But I do remember one thing from learning from her, my mom Darlene, you know, that was my mother, my mother-in-law, Norma. She planted a lot of flowers and made everything look like little park areas all around her yard. Had beautiful flowers. My mother-in-law Jackie, same thing. She really liked geraniums, and she was in with the flower club, you know, and the guild or whatever they called it, and they sold a lot of flowers and stuff in the spring. That was her thing. I mean, she loved planting flowers. She had a lot of house plants. She kind of had a green thumb. I'd always tease her about her mother-in-law's tongue because that thing was huge. I mean, it was just an incredible house plant. But I learned a lot from those women because, you know, they all taught me, you know, if you want pollinators in your garden, you have to plant the flowers in there too. Kai didn't have as much with flowers unless something was flowering and going to seed. And he did have a lot of problem with no shade anywhere in the yard except for where the pear tree was. So one of the first years of him being here, I was like, we need a divider between the yard and the garden, something that's going to be pretty. And so I worked very, very hard on trying to figure out a way of making a divider wall, and got a lot of different trellises and wired everything together, and had to use different pipes and what do you call it? The fence posts, T-posts, and things like that to get that wired up in the ground the way I wanted it. And then I started growing clematis and honeysuckle and the trumpet vine, and it's taken 4 or 5 years for that stuff to look really, really good.
Give us a second.
But it's made a great divider wall between the garden and the backyard where the patio area is. And the dachshunds are saying hi to the neighbor dog right now. So
what we're gonna do here, there's gonna be 2 parts. So as I know this one's fairly long, so we're gonna cut this in half, and so the second part of this will be posted the following day from this one. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell, as you know, next thing is we're gonna do some Q&A discussion with, I'm gonna ask Mom some questions for you guys, and I'm gonna also kind of answer some of them. But this is all about gardening, and you know, things that, you know, are difficult, things that we've learned, and even how interesting it is working together with you know, this generational difference in things. So stay tuned for that.
Get back to your roots.
Yep. And thanks for watching, and we really appreciate you, and hope that you'll stick around with our family here on the gardening channel. With that, peace.
Bye.